An immature version of Mirage coming up with her plan. She's like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go back to school and get that master's degree I wanted to get, spend the next 7 years. And by the time I'm done that, she'll be dead. So.
Welcome to the Macross Delta Recap Show, episode 26. This is EXO, along with the magical girl whose ship missed every death flag but hit every iceberg, Celia Rose.
Hello, everyone.
And our mecha expert that aced every test in the Genius Flight School, Chad.
Hey, everybody.
Chad's excited. Can you tell?
I am excited.
So, episode 26, Eternal Walkure, the final episode of Macross Delta. So, the whole Chaos fleet is going towards Ragna after finding out about the Nuns fleet getting destroyed. On the Windermere side, Keith and Heinz were talking about the future of the war and what they want out of it. Then we see Royd and Mikumo are getting on the star stage. We see Mikumo standing on the front part of the stage, and Royd plugs in to the throne that's supposed to be Heinz, but I guess they're trying to protect Heinz from getting all stressed out by that throne. And who knew that those runes are dongles, right? They just plug right into those things.
I think that's part of the thing with this episode is that like the build up to it was just like it was okay. Like it wasn't anything like to rally up and build up to the action that we had. I mean, when Royd plugged into that chair, he looked like a doofus. He looked really stupid. But then when he plugged in and then you see his cells turn pink and I'm like, well, what's going on? That's what we see when the VAR syndrome happens, but he's not VARing out. So I'm not sure what that was trying to accomplish visually there.
He's like the VARer, not the VARee.
Yeah, but it was weird, and it felt like an inconsistency that I don't really like. But it's the end of the series, so there's not much I can do about it now. I mean, they've got to get Delta Squadron to Ragna, so I guess they're like, well, the Nuns fleet was destroyed. Let's go. I did like when Hayate tries to confess to Freya and he chokes up. That was a neat little moment. He's like trying to say something to her. I don't know if he's actually trying to confess to her, but I think he's trying to say something to her.
I think he was.
That's really important. Yeah, and he like chokes up and he's like, you know what? Forget it. Like, let's just go out. Try to survive this thing.
Mr. If you like somebody, just go ahead and say it, right?
I know, right?
And then when it comes down to him, he couldn't do it. I don't know if we needed another one of those, to tell the truth. When I was watching it, I was thinking, we've kind of gone through this. Do we really need another scene that does that?
It certainly got the episode rolling. I found like that's what it was. I mean, it's clear that everybody knew that they couldn't waste any time doing anything, with this final episode. So they just had to sort of dive into it right away, which is fine. But it also makes the episode a little bit kind of weird to be watching compared to the other ones. It's like usually we have an opening and we're like eased into stuff and there's a progression to things, and it's just this episode is just like, no, we got this stuff to go through, and it's just we gotta go boom 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 with each scene. No time to waste, no long ponderous thoughts, no looking off into the distance or anything like that, no static shots of people going up and down stairwells or anything. It's just gotta happen.
Yeah, maybe we should just go further into the episode, because scenes that are really sudden, they end suddenly, but then there's these scenes that are just super long.
Well, I think it's indicative of the episode overall, right?
Yeah, the scenes were like just getting cut and then jumping to another scene.
Yeah. It wasn't that it wasn't making sense. It made perfect sense. It wasn't like that preview episode where everything was a jumble. This was not the case. But it was just like plot. There's no real time to build any energy. There's no real time to build a lot of emotion. There's not a lot of character development happening here at all. It's just sort of going through the motions kind of thing.
So I don't know if you guys felt it, but I got the impression that they were trying to recreate what they had with episode 13. Like even structurally in some of the visuals from this episode mirror episode 13. But it was one of those things where they tried to recreate it and then didn't really do a good job in recreating it. Yeah. They tried to have the same energy, even the same like format with the episode where it builds up and then you have the action with the Elysian and even the same shot of Walkure coming up from the stage with the asteroids. There's a lot of similarities between the two, but I feel like episode 26 didn't execute them nearly as well as it was in episode 13. And that's kind of part of why I didn't like this episode is because it did feel like they were just trying to be like, oh well, let's copy this episode because it was good and we'll do it again. And then it didn't turn out that way. I would have been okay if it was a good copy of episode 13. I'd been like, you know what, that was fun. But because it didn't execute it in the same way, it felt even more like a copy, and that was not something that really jived with me.
No, I totally agree. I saw the same thing, especially with the Elysian kind of like gliding to the water and then it loses the one arm.
We should kind of talk about this episode in that sort of
Well,
way.
let's just go through the thing. I'm not saying let's just talk about it little by little. Let's just hit all the marks right now, and then let's talk about the episode.
Okay.
How about that?
Okay.
Cool.
So, yeah, after the Chaos Fleet gets to Ragna, Walkyer starts singing, and then it becomes kind of like a singing battle between them, Heinz, and Mikumo. And then Mikumo becomes this giant apparition. You know, like almost every Macross series has that thing where if you see the big idol in the horizon, then that means that's pretty much the end of the series, right? And then during that whole Star Singer dimensional thing that was going on, the triangle confessed with each other, like what they felt, and then there's the big finale battle between Elysian and the Star Shrine, and then we see the Aerial Knights get told by Heinz to go against Royd instead, and they'll take care of the new UN Spacey later on, because right now that's what's important. Because Royd was planning this whole betrayal from the beginning. After the whole big battle, we see the final scenes, and I like those scenes, except for the Marquette thing. But I really like those. I think if they didn't have those final scenes, I would have probably totally hated the episode.
Yeah, the one thing I will say that that I'm not indifferent about, and I am genuinely not fond of, was the end game, which was joining all the humanoids in the galaxy to evolve into this galactic scale life form like the Vajra, where everybody becomes the same life form and their individuality and their differences are like torn apart, and so that will eliminate conflict. It's like the exact same thing that Grace was doing in Macross Frontier, like point for point. This is just exactly her thing, right? She had stated
Yeah.
that she wanted to, eliminate human conflict by basically taking away everybody's individuality and using the Vajra to do that. He even plugs into a machine at the end, just like Grace plugged into the Vajra Queen at the end of Macross Frontier, right? It's just like it's the exact same plot. And I will say that I was not impressed by that. It's too familiar. It's like whenever we get something like that, it is always a little bit difficult to get excited about it. When you do something that's a plot similar to another plot that you've already done, especially in the same IP, using Frontier as an example, you can do that, but you have to bring a bunch of other stuff to the table that either makes up for the fact that you're using a very, very similar plot and gives the audience something else to go on. Here in this episode, we have the exact same plot of Macross Frontier, but we don't have the final episode executed nearly as well as the final episode of Macross Frontier. Even though Frontier suffered from some like scripting problems and story problems in that we weren't given enough information as the audience to make sense of the Macross galaxy and a bunch of other, that whole cabal, and their relationship to the other fleets and the UN Spacey and the corporations and everything like that. That was all a mess and was handled poorly in Frontier. But because the final episode of Frontier was so damned good in so many other respects, it was very fulfilling on like character level, it was very fulfilling on action level and visual level especially, and dramatically it was very impactful, I remember. And here we just don't get any of that, and we don't get anything above and beyond that to sort of make up for the fact that this plot is very, very familiar. That was probably my biggest problem with the episode overall. I did have fun with it. I think I'll agree with Cecilia in that I actually found myself enjoying it in spite of the fact that there wasn't much there, like as far as the good quality stuff that we want. So that's kind of weird to say that, but it ended up being enjoyable. It was fun to watch, but it didn't end up being all that satisfying as a conclusion.
To continue off the Royd plot point, it actually felt pretty tacked on. Like the idea of him connecting everyone in the network, because they didn't use that time where they were trying to, I guess, quote unquote, buy time by like stretching the plot out during those really slow episodes. They didn't do enough, I think, to make that seem more like that's what his purpose was. I mean, yes, they had mentioned the whole building the network with the delta waves and that kind of thing and using the Song of the Wind for that. But then Royd plugs into the chair and is like, I'm going to make my own network. And everyone's so shocked. And I'm like, where'd this come from? Like, what do you mean you're going to make your own neural network? Okay. So it just felt really shoved in there because I think they realized, oh crap, we've got 23 minutes. Let's fill this 23 minutes with as much as we can, before we run out of time to get all of our major story plot points through. I did like this episode visually. There was a lot of really cool shots in this episode that I liked, and the animation was really good. You know, you can tell that they've been really working their budget for this episode for sure. Everything was very, very pretty. So I like that part at least. And just some like little moments in it, but overall I agree with Chad, it wasn't a very satisfying conclusion to the show story-wise.
Yeah, and it's not just stuff that they left off from the previous episodes. They introduced stuff that just didn't make sense. Heinz thinking they saw the power of the Star Singer, so they could just go into a peace talk with the new UN Spacey. But then when they were trapped in that dimensional rift that the Star Singer created, Heinz was like, Royd is the new enemy, let's attack him. And then they were like, what about the new UN Spacey? And he's like, we'll take care of that later. That's a problem that we could take care of after this. It seemed like the war isn't over because he said that. And maybe it's a lot more difficult now to even like restart the war because his big brother's dead, Royd is gone. Where would they be without those two guys? But just the fact that he said that made it seem like, yeah, we're still pretty unhappy with the new and Spacey, and we're not going to go back to the way it was before this whole thing. So it made this whole struggle open-ended as far as the series.
Yeah, I agree with that criticism very strongly. Yeah, this is, I think, the first Macross series where we get to the end of the war that isn't the end.
Yeah.
We have no resolution to the overall conflict. And that is very bizarre to me. That's very, very bizarre. And I'm not really sure why that happened. Maybe it's just a necessity of the limited storytelling time that they had for this episode. They really had no other choice but to play it like that because there's just no time.
It all goes back to those 3 episodes.
And it all goes back to those 3 episodes that we were complaining about, where it's like we should have used our time better to build up to this and get some of these plot lines resolved and completed to satisfaction before getting to this point. And if anything, it sounds like the Windermerians are more than happy to continue on with a conflict after this and have like all sorts of different plans. Heinz might want to do peace talks or something like that, but who knows if it's actually going to happen or not.
And it's weird from last episode too, because remember last episode, he was the one who ordered the use of the Star Song on the Nuns fleet that was coming in.
Yeah.
And he's all like, we're going to destroy them all. And then you open this episode and he's like, we're going to do peace talk. And I'm like, what? Wait, make up your mind. I know he's a young boy, but he's never been portrayed as an impulsive character, where he acts on that emotionality. And like Bogue, that was his role, to be the impulsive, emotional character that acts on those emotions when he has them. But Heinz doesn't really have that. And now when he's coming in like, oh, we'll have peace talks, and then it kind of leaves it open like, well, I guess we're continuing the war, maybe, sort of. I don't know. I don't know how much success he's going to have in peace talks after he blew up the Nuns fleet with the Star Song.
Now he has nothing to back it up.
Yeah, so that's why.
Because he doesn't have the Star Song.
I agree. It's completely weird. I don't know why they decided to do that other than they ran out of time. And you've still got Berger out there, like Belger.
Yeah.
This guy is still out there playing both sides. And
that's why I'm thinking, like, I mean, no, I don't think there's going to be a second season, but I don't see why not. At the same time, it's like, well, I guess we could still resolve some stuff, but do we really need like a second season? Or can we do it all in one movie? Or what's the plan here, really,
I don't know, but like they left some things that the show put so much emphasis on, like things that the show really wanted to tell you mattered. Like the fact that Belger was allies on both sides and trying to make a profit from it, which is why everyone thought he was going to be the new big bad instead of Royd. And that didn't end up happening, but Belger's still out there. What are we supposed to do about him? They made a really big deal out of Lady M. Nothing came of that. And that was really annoying. I at least expected like maybe like a cameo or like a glimpse of who she is or like mentioned by name, but nothing.
Yeah, that's
and
actually
they made her a
another
big
one.
deal, and that's so annoying.
That was also a very frustrating thing, and I actually suspected that something like that might happen because we apparently got some sort of like pseudo reveal or something like that about who Lady M was in the last episode, and I was kind of like thinking, well, if that's the big reveal for the Lady M thing, then I doubt we're going to get anything from her like the rest of this episode because there's just not enough time, I wouldn't think, to do it. And it turns out that we were kind of right. It was just like, yeah, there isn't enough time to deal with this plot point, and as a result, it just gets dropped. The whole Belger thing, like again, it's a situation like Cecilia said, where so much time was spent on this Belger character, and the Epsilon Foundation as well was a constant presence throughout the series. And here at the end of the series, it's like completely irrelevant. There's no mention of him whatsoever. There's no close to that story or to the Epsilon Foundation's like involvement or anything like that. So none of the political machinations from behind the scenes are relevant or make any sort of impact whatsoever on the finale of the series. Or if they do, we don't know about them. And the whole relationship between Lady M, Belger, and Royd is just left completely unresolved. We commented and laughed, I remember, about some of the apparent like maneuvers that they were doing in the last episode and how they appeared to have some sort of forethought or some sort of game being played between the three of them. And there were just scraps of that. And then in this episode, we get absolutely nothing at all, which I guess isn't surprising given how underwritten this particular triumvirate is, I guess, of the background characters of the Macross Delta story. So it's not unexpected absence, but also it is something that's just irritating on an audience level.
And there was another thing that I mentioned to Celia on Twitter. I was like, what was the point of introducing Norman again? Like, it was just like, hey, here's my son. And then it's like, that was it. We see him once talking to Cosm, and then that was about it. They didn't even use him.
Well, we were speculating that he was going to be used as a tragic sort of figure to kill off later in the series, but that didn't happen either.
It's weird, kind of like unprepared for a lot of the stuff that they introduced, and maybe they should have introduced some stuff that they just failed. Like maybe if they would have gone through why Roy decided to do what he did. I mean, I know there's supposed to be like a surprise reveal, but they could have just done some stuff about him studying Badra, or maybe even looking into what Grace was doing and stuff like that, and make it seem like, what does this mean? Why is he looking into that?
Well, he could have been much more of an interesting villain instead of just like a one-dimensional sort of mustache twirling sort of caricature that he ended up becoming. It was strange too because he seemed to have the potential as a villain. I remember commenting that I wasn't really sure where they were going with the character, at least initially, like for the first third of the series, because we were like, oh, well, he seems to be in like a very prominent position and he's important and he's basically calling a lot of shots or like carrying out the will of Gromia and Hines and everything else. And then there was this moment where he kind of got subsumed by Keith. And we were like, apparently he's been like stripped of his importance, or Keith is just bypassing him. And then Gromia comes along and takes total control over everything, and Roy just gets completely sidelined. And I was like, oh, well, this is an interesting development. It seems like he's being taken out of the picture entirely. And I was wondering, well, maybe they're going to show a little bit more story of how he worms his way back in, which they did to a certain extent, and it was satisfying. It started to get quite interesting, but then they stopped, and there wasn't anything else beyond that for him. And from that point onward, he either remained flat or just became this increasingly more preposterous and absurd caricature of villain. And then also, like, I remember I said some criticisms about the relationship between Keith and Royd, how it played again a prominent part in this episode, and I was again left unfulfilled. I won't repeat the criticisms that I had last episode. I'll just say that those criticisms apply yet again.
Yeah, that scene, I think that it definitely needed more development to make it matter, because the impression that I got when, Keith and Royd are fighting, and Keith fights him, controlling a white version of Keith's Draken, and how he talked about how he won that race, and he's always wanted to fly and fly as fast as Keith and as high in the sky and that kind of thing. And the impression that I got is, oh boy, this guy really wanted to be Keith. Like he's controlling his own version of Keith's plane in the battle against him, and Keith still overpowered him. But because there wasn't that additional like framework to the relationship between those two, and it's not that apparent that might be what they're trying to intend with that scene, other than showing us, here's the Keith's Draken in white and gold, so we can make a toy out of it. And it was kind of a shame, especially because I really wanted a resolution between Keith and Hines. Like Keith blew up after he stabbed Royd, and I was disappointed by that. Like at first, I didn't realize that that's what happened, and you don't know that's what happened until Herman says something like 5 minutes later.
Yeah, I didn't actually realize that as well. I mean, just the way I guess it was edited and put together, I didn't put two and two together that Keith and Royd were actually in the structure that blew up. I guess just visually and storytelling wise, I just wasn't following along. And so it wasn't until everybody reacted that I was like, oh yeah, Keith and Royd just died. Obviously, I knew Royd was going to die anyway. He got like stabbed through the torso with a sword. So obviously he was on the way out. But then when it blew up, it was like, Yeah, there was this double take. Yeah, it was surreal. It was bizarre.
Yeah, same here. I think I went back and I didn't realize it until Bogue started screaming.
Yeah.
Oh shit. It did blow up. I mean, you see it blow up, but you've seen a lot of things blow up in Macross and then it's Marianne. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
you don't know if they live or not. But that was really unsatisfying because what was the point of him killing Royd if they were gonna all blow up anyways? You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I got you. Oh, it's like why? And somebody like Keith should have died in his Valkyrie, you know what I mean? Fighting, not like standing there with a sword to his best friend. Yeah, I would also agree with the whole like they should have invested us more. And that would have been such a great rivalry.
Well, remember we talked about it in the earlier part of the show, how it was that whole like dynamic between Royd and Keith was actually really getting interesting in the early part of the series. It almost felt like there was not necessarily a competition, but there was like almost some antagonism or something like that going on between them. And they weren't necessarily fighting each other, but each of them wanted to do things their own way
Yeah.
and was willing to do whatever it took to do that, whether it meant stepping over the other person or not. That's what I found so interesting about it, because it almost felt like an incidental competition. They didn't necessarily want to be at odds with each other. They just wanted to achieve different things, and as a result had to be, at odds with each other in certain ways. But then because they had this familiarity with each other and this closeness, made that antagonistic relationship in the attempt to achieve your own goals, made that much more interesting dramatically, right? Because there's this emotional element to it then, where these guys are actually really good friends and whatnot. But then later on in the series, we just didn't get anything from Keith. That was the biggest thing. And we got less from Royd as well. If they would have developed that relationship, you could have had more of that back and forth between the two of them, and it could have shown a little bit more of the emotional investment they had in each other, in the relationship, how they respected each other, or blah, blah, blah. It's just something. But like Keith was like, he kept going through this series as a complete blank slate. I never got anything out of him, like as far as like character development or drama or emotionality or anything. He was just flat the entire time.
Well, and that's why I was disappointed that he died. Because at the very least, he could have come back to Heinz later, like after they survived everything with Royd and got that taken care of, and been like, hey, sorry I was a dick. Let's fly in the same sky together now. Because that's the one point that he had in this series that had some development of his character, is that he really distanced himself from his brother. His motivations for distancing are very unclear. Even if he just came back later and was like, I'm sorry. Let's fix this, and I'll try to be a better brother. That would have redeemed him just a little bit.
They even show that little scene where he's like kind of like looking at Heinz as a baby, added to it, but just didn't amount to anything because he again got killed unceremoniously.
And those are sort of sequences that we should have got like many, many episodes ago.
Yeah, and a bunch of them.
To try and build that relationship, give it some
with
context.
some dialogue, not just like flashes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I like that scene though, not actually for that reason, not because.
Yeah, let's go through that. Let's go through something that we liked for a little while.
So
let's take a break.
Let's take a break from griping. Actually, I like that comparison between Gramia and Keith and Wright and Hayate. I don't think it actually contributes to the overall plot, but I really liked that visual comparison of what it means to be an absent or a distant father. So, because Gramia, while he was present in Keith's life, was very distant from his son and even told him to stop calling him his father and disowned him. So even though he was physically there, emotionally he was not. And Keith really suffered the consequences for that. And that's something that wasn't explored further in the series, and it's a shame because that could have been a really neat way to compare him and Hayate with their supposed rivalry that didn't really go anywhere. But then you have the image of Hayate on Wright's shoulders, where Wright wasn't physically able to be present with his son due to his job in the military, but he was still emotionally connected to him and was sending him those letters and teaching him things about where he was going and how to appreciate those little things, like what we talked about last episode. It was literally 2 seconds that those images flashed through. And I really liked the comparison between the two. And it's a shame that we didn't get time to explore it in the series, but I really liked that a lot. And of course, little Mirage sitting in her grandma's plane.
The VF9.
That was really neat.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. The VF9 Cutlass got a small little cameo here in this, and I was not expecting that at all. That was cool. That feels like a nod back to one of the video games, actually.
Yeah.
I think it's Macross M3, the Dreamcast video game that featured the VF9 Cutlass, specifically Max and Milia's VF9 Cutlass.
And they had a daughter in that one too.
Yeah.
That video game.
Yeah, so it was very, very, very cool. That was unexpected. As soon as I saw that picture, I was like, oh God, I want to see, more of that. Do a complete CG model and have that thing flying around. That would be
Yeah.
nice. So yeah.
You could see Max's VF9 way in the back, and
Back, yeah.
also what I'm suspecting is the VF1S from the DRL movie, but you could barely see it. And
Yeah, it was hard. Yeah.
we've been talking about it, like which one it is. That was fun, just talking about which VF1 that could be. Even though there were fond memories, some of it kind of led to what I thought were regrets. Like Mirage's thing with her character. She never lived up to that genius name, right? And then they showed like the flight school genius air. And then Hayate, they showed him and his dad, but then it was kind of like tragic because he died away from Hayate. And then the whole Keith thing and
Messer.
Oh yeah,
Haname
Messer.
and Messer.
And of course.
My ship sailed.
You
Just barely.
Like.
It's a raft. It's a raft with like this teeny tiny sheet.
Yeah.
There it is.
I actually, I'll agree with you, Alex. I actually like that part of Mirage, her character development in this episode. I guess we don't want to concentrate on the bad stuff, but I just want to say that I would have liked a lot more of that earlier in the series instead of just leaving it to this. But that is a really compelling idea. Just as a person, she had to grow up so obsessed with the idea of living up to the legacy of the genus family of pilots that she actually lost sight of the fact that she loves flying. And it was Hayate who showed her to enjoy flying. And that would have been great to see her go through that earlier in the series, because that would have been an interesting way to overcome her problems in flying. The fact that she always overthinks things. And it's like, if she can learn to actually get back to that point when she was younger, where she actually did like to fly, and she can remember those feelings, it would sort of like undo all that anxiety and let her become the pilot that she was always meant to be. And that's such a compelling, dramatic arc for her character. And anyway, it's good stuff. I just wish there was more of it.
Yeah, they rushed through it.
I even think that would have made her confession like more impactful too, if we got to see a little bit more of that. Where she's like, I love flying again, and we believe her because we see it. Instead of Herman lecturing her and being all like, you think too much. Yeah. You need to stop. And I'm like, no. Oh, she's a good character with so much potential. Like, I really liked the way that way that her arc was going, where they were really making her out to be this person who's normal. Like, there's not anything that's particularly fantastic about her. She's not as talented as her grandparents before her, and she has this big legacy to live up to, but she's going to do her best and has this great amount of determination to be that high standard that she puts herself up to, even if she doesn't truly believe she can get there. So I really, really liked that. And that's why I'm kind of disappointed with the way that they handled her at the end, because that was so neat. Like, to be like this ordinary person who still gives her best and succeeds, even if it's not in the way she initially thought that she wanted to, but it turns out to be the way that works for her.
That was one of the things I commented on. We actually talked a great deal about, actually, in the early episodes of the recap show, was Mirage's character, and how one of the things that was so compelling about her character, she's not going to be a superstar, like the other ace pilot in the Macross series, but that's not what she needs to be, like the most help to her team. Right. And it turns out that her greatest strength is her ability to just like keep at it, like her persistence and her genuine willingness to be the best that she can be at what she's doing, and to make sure that everybody else is doing their job. Right. She was just growing into such like a natural leader, like just leading by example. And that was what actually helped her and the rest of her team the most out of anything else. They didn't need her to be an ace pilot. They needed her to be the best Mirage that she could be, kind of thing. And that was more than enough. And I thought that was great, because it showed that even people who don't have like these crazy skills, it was like a theme that was running through Macross Delta with both the Mirage character and the Kaname character. And it was this theme that you don't have to be the absolute best to make a huge difference if you're willing to actually put in the work. Right. And that was such a compelling, like everyman kind of story that I really wish they would have gone with and showed more of the virtues of that. Because at the end of the day, that's basically what most of the audience is sort of like looking for, right? I mean, it's okay to dream and to, and to imagine and everything else about like all these, amazing characters that were the best at what they do, and we all think of ourselves at one point in our lives of that's what we want to be, or that's how we want to act. But for a lot of us, we're just, we're average people. But that doesn't mean that we can't make like this significant contribution doing the things that we're good at doing. And that was just something that doesn't get celebrated enough in a lot of entertainment and media. And it was sort of nice to see Macross Delta kind of take that, route with those two characters. And I would have liked a lot more of that, and to see the fruits of her labor. That would have been great. So yeah, I'm overall disappointed, I guess, with that particular character arc. And hopefully, yeah, something like that doesn't happen again with another
Yeah.
Macross series. Hopefully, they get that sort of thing right. Just a lot of great characters that were developed early on that had a lot of potential for some really compelling stories, and just not enough done to take advantage of the great, the work that was already there. And it's sad because I remember being so into this series for the first 2/3 of it, and just being along for the ride and just loving every second of it against my better judgment, because I didn't really think that this series was going to be that good based on the preview episode. And it turned me around completely, and I got so invested in so many of these characters. And then unfortunately the ball was dropped on a lot of them, and we didn't get a satisfying close.
Do you guys think that well, I don't know if you guys read the interview, but because you guys were kind of afraid of spoilers, but there was that interview that said that it was supposed to be one core and then it was extended to two. You guys think that had any effect on the story? Or
Maybe, because at the time that they decided that was during the not production. I think it was the script writing phase, like before the actual production of the episode. So I'm not sure.
It doesn't matter when they decided, but I'm asking, do you think just extending it? That first half was so great, and then that finale was so awesome. It seemed like they had a great finale to begin with, and then it got, I don't know.
I'd have to see what kind of story direction they would have wanted to take. Because
just with that one core,
yeah, because it's the difference between 26 episodes and potentially movie. I know everyone wants a movie. Everyone online is like, yeah, movie. I don't want it, sorry. But if they're going to do 13 episodes and then a movie, I'd really like to see where they were going to go instead, because 2 hours to cover everything that they did in the last 13 episodes may not have been enough to do what they wanted to do, and that's probably why they extended it. I think I'd have to see, I guess, what they were thinking, what they would do with that movie to decide whether or not that would have made a difference.
Like I said, it doesn't really matter when they decided to do it. It just makes me wonder why it's such a stark difference between the first half to the next. I mean, we did get good episodes on the second half. It was consistent all the way through the first core.
It makes me wonder what they would have done with Royd. Because if Royd is intended to be our big bad the whole time, they might have gone about it in a different way. So instead of where we had the 13 episodes where we learned a little bit more about the Windermerians, more development of the love triangle that didn't seem to really have a ton of development anyways, other than the birthday episode. I think that's probably the strongest second half development of that romantic relationship was the birthday episode. Yeah. But they might have taken some elements out. I don't know if we would have gotten Belger. He may have just been one of those characters that stayed this random guy that shows up and works for the bad guy, and not turn into the merchant that's trying to play both sides, which he ended up being, and then not having really a conclusion to that character or that arc that they were, I think, trying to set up for him. I'd be interested to see what they would have done differently if they were going to stick with that format, because then I think that would help me decide, I guess, which would have been more effective or which would have been better. So I don't know. I would be curious to know, though, what they were thinking. I'd like to see what ideas they would have had. And we probably won't know until interviews come out later.
I don't think we'll know. I don't think they're going to even address that. How could you, right? It's like, oh, we made this mistake and blah, blah, blah. I don't think, especially if it's a popular sales with the Blu-ray and everything, I don't think it would even matter.
Well, there was the one interview that Carice translated. That was one of the scriptwriters from Frontier, where they came back after Frontier, I think. I have to double check that. I'm not 100% sure, not certain on that. And talked about why they wrote the ending of Frontier like they did. So I think we might see one of those later.
That'd be cool.
About why they chose to go with 2 cores for Delta instead of their initial plan for 1 core in a movie.
Let's get into the confessions.
We got a conclusion.
Yeah.
I'm a Hayamira shipper. I really wanted Mirage to get Hayate because I wanted her to have happiness.
So from the beginning, you were a Mirage Hayate shipper. Nothing that happened in between would have changed your mind about which way to ship.
In the beginning, I really just wanted someone to pick somebody.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
then it was the birthday episode that I'm like, well, now I really want Mirage to win. that made me choose a side was the birthday episode. Even though that was definitely set up to be like, Hayate and Freya have feelings for each other and they're probably going to end up together. Like it was even Mirage who kind of set it in motion, like asking Hayate, why do you have feelings for her? Do you have feelings for her? So I'm just glad that it came to a conclusion though, because there was a point where it wasn't really moving anywhere.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if we were going to have a conclusion. Like, at least in Frontier, in the TV series, Alto didn't choose. And he said, you both are my wings. But you had development between him and Ronka and him and Cheryl. So it did seem like there was potential for it to go either way. If you were looking at it with an unbiased lens, like I clearly did not, because I was very pro Cheryl and I thought she was going to win for a while. But with this one, I think it would have been a shame if they had done the same thing, like copied the Frontier finale and had Hayate say, you both are my wings, but not have the development to back it up.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they decided to conclude it and have someone choose someone at the very least.
Yeah, because there was already a lot of fans that were like, every time you say something like, oh, I wish these guys would just choose somebody now. There was all those fans that were saying like, didn't you read that interview? Macross Delta is not about the triangle, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, well, they shouldn't have introduced it if it's not about that. And I'm so glad they did resolve it, because it just would have been silly. That would have been the one thing that would have really upset me if they didn't finish that up.
Yeah.
I think they did it too late. I think it would have been more exciting if they said something earlier and then had the conflict within the triangle, something that would just give more drama to the show.
Yeah, I definitely would have liked to see more build up, because I would have been okay with the confession in this episode if there was some more build up to make it feel more impactful. But I still liked it though. I remember that, Hayate said, if you have feelings, you should just say it.
Yeah.
And all three of them confessed their feelings. So I like that. But I also like the point where Mirage, she says, her confession. And then she's like, Freya, why aren't you saying anything?
Yeah.
Like, I know you have feelings to say it. Why aren't you saying it?
That's so Mirage.
It's so
That
Mirage. And it reminded me of when she tried to say something to Hayate and she ended up saying, I love you both. Yeah. That reminded me of that, because she does genuinely like both Hayate and Freya. And I like that they kept that consistent, at least, where she's like, I know you have feelings, now just say them. And she kept Freya's secret. You find out in a flashback that Freya confided in her about the icy crusty on her hand, and Mirage didn't tell anybody. She really sees Freya as a friend. And I liked that. I really liked that. And I really liked how gracefully Mirage stepped out of the triangle once she realized that she didn't win.
I made fun of that scene last week. I was like, yeah, so Mirage totally ran into Freya, and that didn't lead to anything. Then I watched it this week. I was like, okay, maybe that one did go somewhere.
Yeah,
well,
you couldn't have
known that. You couldn't have known that at the time. So
yeah, the way everything else was going, I'm surprised that it actually did have some kind of impact on the story.
Okay, so everyone was joking online about Freya dying because of the icy crusty on her hand and that she was going to die this episode. When she leans across Hayate and she's all like, the wind is gentle or the wind is kind or something like that?
Oh, yeah.
I thought she died. Like when I first watched it, because she kind of flops across him and she's all like, and then she speaks and then she's quiet and doesn't move. And for a brief second, I thought that she just died in his lap. And I'm like, is this what we're going to do? Is this going to be the second Frontier movie all over again where Cheryl falls in a coma after Alto confesses his feelings for her?
It would have been funny.
Oh,
and then he would have just tossed Freya and then go back to Mirage,
no,
right?
God. Okay, I know that's a joke right now.
Yeah.
About Freya dying and then Hayate just switching to Mirage.
Oh, that frustrates me. And I said that before, like early into the show when they mentioned that they only lived to 30 years old average, And I said something like that. And I think the joke went through everybody's head, right? The whole, just live with her for 15 years and then go to Mirage. But then the joke just kept going and going. And people are actually saying now, like, seriously, yeah, just wait it out. And I'm like, are you nuts? That's not how it works. How love works. You just don't I'll just wait for Freya to just kind of lay down and stop breathing. Ugh.
What did you think, Chad?
Yeah, Chad.
I can just see an immature version of Mirage coming up with her plan. She's like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to go back to school and get that master's degree I wanted to get, spend the next 7 years. And by the time I'm done that, she'll be dead. You know?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Like, no, that doesn't work that way, man.
Oh, God, that's horrible.
It is horrible.
Okay, so what? Yeah, the love triangle. It's a conclusion. It's not a satisfying conclusion in any sort of way, I don't think. But I think it's the way it had to go. If they tried to do a Hayate Mirage finale, that would have been just terrible. Because we've had nothing to go on as far as the love triangle. I mean, we talked about that before. How Mirage has basically been like completely absent. We had a lot of buildup throughout the latter part of the series for Hayate and Freya, and then nothing on the Mirage side. So even if there was going to be like some sort of conclusion, we didn't build up to it equally for any of the other characters except Freya and Hayate. That's it. That's the only combination that could work given what was done in the series. So how could it go any other way? And of course, it didn't go any other way. It went exactly the way that we predicted. So this ended up becoming a love triangle that was extremely underwritten. And I realize that they've said that that's intentional, but it's also not fulfilling in any way, shape, or form. So as a result, you have a lot of time. Okay, maybe you don't have in Delta as much time spent on the love triangle as they've spent on the love triangles in other Macross productions, but they still spent a considerable amount of time on this relationship between these three characters, and it ended up going nowhere interesting. It didn't have a dramatically compelling finale at all. It didn't give us any tension, anything like that. So as a result, it's just there. It's almost like a placeholder, right? It's like here's your love triangle.
It was a checklist.
Just because we need it on our checklist, and that's it. That's all we're going to do for it. It's not really important because it's not really the focus of the show, and you shouldn't really be concentrating on that. That's not what Delta's about. Then why bother having it at all? Right? It is now with the finale, it is literally dead weight throughout the entire series. I can't look at it any other way. So it's kind of, that's kind of disappointing. Not much else to be said other than that. I think the thing about it that isn't making me mad is that it reached its natural conclusion. Like this is the way it had to go. And I think that that's consistent. That's very consistent with how the characters were written throughout the entire series. So I think that's good. Yeah, as far as Mirage and like the three of them resolving their relationship inside the Star Singers connected,
their naked hijinks.
Yeah, that little sort of like meta psionic state that they were in there when everybody was connected to one another. I liked that actually. That was one of the parts of the episodes that was true to the characters and very compelling. And again, it made Mirage look awesome because she doesn't take the route that you think that most characters are going to take, and that she's going to try fighting and stuff like that for her affections with Hayate. It's like, no, it's clear that this is not how the relationships between these three characters are going to go. Hayate and Freya are going to end up a couple because those are who the two of them are emotionally invested in. And Mirage's love is going unrequited. So instead of like just bawl her eyes out or act out and stuff like an immature person would do, Mirage stays true to her character, which is being the more mature of all the three. And she does her best to make what is there work for the two of them. And even like Cecilia said, like just chastising Freya for not having, the courage to lay her emotions bare now that everybody else has. And that's what Mirage does best. Again, leading by example is leading others, teaching others, being the mature one in the group, and doing the work and doing what's necessary to get the job done. Right. And that's what's so great about Mirage. And it was great to see that aspect of her, especially at the finale, because we haven't been given enough good Mirage in the last like 5 or so episodes of the series. So it was really good to see this come about. And I love that part of it. I thought it was great. I think it was a stronger finish for Mirage than the Hayate and Freya situation at the end. Even though they're the ones that have, I guess, won the love triangle, if you could call it that, their conclusion wasn't nearly as dramatically satisfying as Mirage's. To me, anyway.
Yeah. I guess I can't complain, though, because I got 2 of my 3 ships that I was rooting for this entire show. The girlfriends made it.
Yeah, did they ever, huh? Reyna and Machina? That was... God,
They
that
survived.
Thanks to Vogue.
Thanks to Vogue, yes.
Thanks to Vogue.
who again
Oh
got a
gosh.
little bit embarrassed.
He gets to be a Valkyrie fanboy in the open now, guys.
Yeah.
Like, did you see when he's like holding his rune up and he's like, but my rune, why? While they're singing.
Trying to convince himself that just this once, I'm just doing this cuz doesn't mean anything. Poor sexually repressed Bogue.
God, I like him. At the
I
beginning of the
know,
series, I didn't like him,
so-
but I
yeah.
like him now.
Oh yeah, his just because that aspect of him is just it makes him so human and so relatable, right? I mean, before it was just his energy that was, that was entertaining, but we never really got into him as a character. But through that sort of like that insecurity he has around girls and he's clearly into them, it's just that that made him so human, and so you just wanted to root for him, in that respect. So it was great.
He almost cried too.
Yeah.
When Keith died, and like I didn't
Yeah.
realize he was dead, but then watching it a second time, I realized that Bo could feel Keith's passing in his runes. And when he realized that he had died, like his eyes got all watery.
Yeah.
And then when they're saluting Royd and Keith after Herman reveals that both of them died, you see Bo kind of tear up a little bit, and he even sniffles. He sniffles, and then he looks up like determinedly at the sky, like, oh my, my Lord Keith and my Lord Royd, I followed you to the end type of thing. I liked that. That was good. It was very brief, but it was good development for Bogue.
It would have been good to see the Windermereans after this whole war.
Yes, I would have definitely liked to see that. I mean, definitely the planet has suffered repercussions. Hines says too, he's like, when he was talking to Keith in the beginning, and he asked, did Father feel all those souls passing every time someone died? When he's talking about, all the little sparkles and the stars that he saw at the shrine after the nuns' fleet blew up. And he realized, he was like, does everybody feel that? And he realizes that the whole planet feels it. Everyone who has runes feels those spirits passing. So while they've been waging this war, every time somebody dies, everybody on Windermere can sense it and feel it. So
Yeah.
I'd really like to see how Windermere, at least like the setup for them to rebuild, not necessarily saying let's spend 10 episodes seeing how Windermere rebuilds itself, but just being like, now we're going to do this. Even if they just do it in a brief exposition and see the knights returning back home, I would have liked to see that.
Going back to what you said earlier, feeling like all the deaths and all that stuff, I kind of think that's what convinced Hines to go for peace, because I think he was disturbed by the nuns' fleet, like all those people, all those spirits all dying at once.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like it scared the shit out of him.
That would scare me
Now that-
too.
Yeah, now that I think about it, I think that's what led him to seek peace instead of more destruction.
Yeah.
Poor guy, such a young guy.
I should have thought that it could be something interesting to explore. I mean, not just the metaphysical, magical anime part of it with all them, feeling each other's souls in their passing, but just the idea of the burden of leadership, because it's a real thing in real life, being responsible for millions of people, even if it's only for a short while. But in the case of the Windermereans, they're monarchs, so it's sort of like becomes their role for life. That could have been something interesting for Hines to explore throughout this series. It would have given him something more to do instead of being the perpetual victim throughout 90% of the series, right? Where he only really got some stuff to do at the end. You're going to give another dimension to that character. Every time we talk about the characters and whatnot, I'm always thinking of how they could have been better handled. And I mean, This is no revelation. We were talking about this many, many episodes again in the show, like all the different characters. I mean, we had commented on how like poor Hines is just, always being manipulated and never actually getting to do anything or try to work his way out of it. He's just, you even called him, I think, the Tommen of Macross Delta at one point, if I remember correctly.
Celia
It's a
said
great,
that, yeah.
great Game of Thrones reference. But it was such a shame. And all those wasted episodes where nothing happened could have been used to properly embellish these characters and give them some arcs. And it didn't actually have to be all that much. Just we didn't need that much for some of the other characters that we got invested in. We just needed something. So yeah, that could have been something else done a little bit better with this series for sure.
Let me ask Celia, did you know without watching the subs that Mirage was confessing?
Yes.
Oh, I had no idea. I turned into like one of those moms that watch soap operas. I was watching the subs and I kind of like knew what was happening, except for that one piece. And I was just like, as soon as she said like, I love you, I was like, what? And then I looked around like if there was somebody in the room and I'm like, did you see this? Did you see her?
Oh,
She
yeah.
just told him that she loves him, but she knows that she's not even part of the triangle. It was just like such a good scene. Of course, I had much respect for Mirage at that point. But it was just funny how it's just like, wow, what's the point of that? At the same time, it's like, I get it. Let's move Freya. Freya, if you don't do it, I will.
Yeah. With that scene is the dialogue was pretty simple, which is why I understood it right away. I'm like, oh yes, that's what you're saying. And it really kind of seemed natural too, anyways, because even before then, Hayate is saying as he's disappearing, he's like, I want to protect Freya, mamoritai, I want to protect. And I'm like, okay, this is gonna go somewhere. And then he clutches that damn necklace that was making him sick, and now apparently lets him disrupt the communication network of that new thing that Royd was setting
It's the
up.
link. It's the link between him and Freya.
I'm just
anime magic.
Anime magic. That's it. It's anime magic. Apparently, it lets him break free of his mind control that's trying to erase him and make her part of a greater project. So at that point, I was like, all right, here we go. It's gonna happen. And so I did like it. I still like that scene, and it was, I thought, pretty good.
All right,
Mikumo, guys. What did you guys think of Mikumo as the star singer in this episode?
I was about to ask. I was like, I loved it. I loved the way like her dress appeared, and then she was singing the star singer song
that turned into "Do You Remember Love?"
It broke into "Ayoboete Imasuka." And I was just like, oh, yeah. And it kind of shocked me because I was kind of thinking that it was going to be Freya that was going to be singing that part.
Yeah, I love that part of it. It was so good. I mean, the music was just awesome. And also just the imagery and I guess the tension around her being sort of like this force that they have to contend with. And it meant so much more because everybody loved Mikumo. It was that much more tense to have our heroes have to fight against Mikumo when everybody loves her. And just on a visual level too, it was very Macrossy,
Yes.
which was so great because that's always good, at least visually. And musically, it was like a combination of Minmay from the original series with like Sharon Apple from Macross Plus, this big hollow projected sort of thing in this kind of like cross-like formation, which is very evocative of not only like the character design in Macross Plus, but also the CG visuals and the iconography of the Macross Plus series, which had that great crystal cross. It was awesome. It was amazing.
I love that imagery of the giant Mikumo with the Sigurd Valens, the wings behind her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
And firing around her.
Yeah, and then when her dress changed and she was like that big, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. It was triumphant when it did change from the Star Singer to the Walkyer outfit.
It was a nice role reversal too, because you've had Mikumo asking Freya frequently throughout the series, why do you sing?
Oh, yeah.
And then this time around, after Freya leaped into space, much like episode 13, just keeps flying, and she's saying, and she's all like, Mikumo, this is why I sing. Why do you sing? And that kind of snaps Mikumo out of her star singer thing. And she's all like, that's right. I sing because I love to sing with Walkure. And it turns out her motivations are the same as Freya's. I sing because I love to sing. And that was pretty cool, though. I can't deny that. That was cool. I like the new costumes, too. Those are the Arisa Ibata costumes, or at least a variation of them.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if that was it. I recognize the split skirts and all that stuff that Arisa Ibata drew.
Yeah.
They're not exact, though?
No. So the version in the opening credits has them in what looks to be like a wet look leather, like bodysuit, with the split skirts that flare out on the sides and the little mini vests. But in the show, they chose to do skirts. I'm not sure why. I would think it'd be easier to do pants instead of the movement of skirts. But I appreciate both versions because Risa Ibata designed them, and I love her costume designs. A lot of the costumes in the show have been ugly.
Yeah, I gotta agree.
They've been really, really ugly. Like my friend asked me to do Delta cosplay with her at a con this spring, and I'm having a hard time deciding what I want to do. Because I'm like, there aren't a lot of outfits in this show that I want to make because most of them are not very attractive, at least compared to Frontier. Like coming out of the whole range in wardrobe that Ronka and Cheryl had, Delta's been pretty lacking in that department, at least for me. And I'm looking at it from the perspective of someone who wants to make and wear those outfits.
It all depends on how many cons you're going to go to. There's enough in Delta, and I don't like a lot of the costumes. I don't like the original ones, especially Mikumo. Her kind of like, what is that? Kind of like a bustier that has that goes right into her skirt. I don't know.
It does not work without tape or glue. I can tell you that much. It does not work without tape or glue.
But I like the ones with the ties. I love the Risa Ibata ones. And I don't know. I can't think of... I like the Star Singer.
Yes, I like that one too. That's going to be a project. but
I think
it's really
Mikumo
cool.
has most of the good ones. And you also have the Voldor stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Mikumo is also supposed to be like the Cheryl copycat of this show, at least in my opinion.
Jesus. I'm just kidding.
Cheryl is queen. All hail Queen Cheryl.
Poor Mikumo.
I know, poor thing.
Well, she is a clone.
There you go.
Oh.
She's a Cheryl clone that didn't quite meet the expectations of Cheryl.
Oh, how dare you.
I can say that because Cheryl's better.
Oh, I'm gonna have to invite Juna to come kick your ass.
I actually like the Macross Elysian parts as well. I mean, I know that some people had their issues with it, but I actually enjoyed that whole sequence and them basically breaking through the protoculture shrine. I think they called it the Star Shrine or something like that, that sits on top of the ruins.
Oh yeah, the Aether
and
attack.
The Aether attack
Yeah.
and busting through and then basically getting in there. That was awesome. I liked that whole sequence. And the animation was so good.
It was good.
The ship looked just amazing. Even before that, in the earlier part of the episode, actually, I never got to geek out about some of the more mechanical stuff of the episode, because there was quite a bit of that that I did enjoy. And one of it was the Elysian and its Valkyries as well, going through the asteroid field around Ragna, fighting their way through, destroying ships and dogfighting and everything, and even just using their the pinpoint barrier system on the Elysian looked really cool. There was this one
like that
sequence
too.
where they were flying through the asteroid field and they were using the pinpoint barrier instead of navigating around, which they ordinarily would have done. They just didn't have the time. So they were just like barreling through the asteroids and they didn't care if they hit anything. And they were using the pinpoint barriers to sort of deflect the space debris away from them and push asteroids out of the way and just come on through, which was seriously cool. I did like that sequence a lot. Yeah, it was great.
Did you see when they're using the pinpoint barriers in time with the music too?
Yes.
That was so good when
That
the girls
was
are like
pretty
Gyun,
awesome.
Gyun, Gyun, and the barriers go up. I'm like, oh, that's so good. That is one thing about Delta that I give it credit for, that I really like about it, is their timing and use of the Valkyrie songs in the series has been excellent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like just matching that beat for beat was it was awesome.
Cool. Just everything about those mechanical sequences is really enjoyable. Actually, I like the animation for the cannons, the turret cannons on the Macross Elysian. All of the little animations that they did for that and having them fire and move and all that was just like, it was really good. I mean, it were just like small little details that most people wouldn't pay attention to, but I actually really appreciated it. And actually, one of the things I will say about this series, I have some criticisms to go through with the mechanical design, but we'll deal with that later. And a couple other final thoughts on the series. But one of the things I did very much like about this series was the prominent use of pinpoint barrier systems, because they've been like a staple of the Macross Valkyries since the Macross Plus era. And I found that they kept on getting used inconsistently. Even in Frontier, they were just used like so rarely that at times you forgot that these Valkyries were even equipped with them. And I remember sometimes feeling like, oh God, yeah, they're finally using their pinpoint barrier. There was that sequence in Macross Frontier where Ozma in his armored VF-25S uses the back armor of his Batroid mode plus the pinpoint barrier system to block this shot that's fired on the bridge of the Macross the Macross Quarter. And I remember thinking that it had been so long since they had used the pinpoint barrier systems in the fighters at that point in the series. Like it had been like a dozen episodes or more. I had forgotten that they had them on board, right? And I think the audience might have forgotten too, and they couldn't be blamed if they did. But in this series, in Macross Delta, they were used consistently all the time, nonstop, in like almost every episode where they had fighting. They were shown using the pinpoint barrier systems, and I thought that was great. It was like, yeah, finally, a Macross series where they're using the pinpoint barrier systems like they're supposed to, regularly, like constantly, all the time. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And they were visualized very well. Not necessarily anything new or different about the way they were visualized. It just looks more streamlined, more consistent. It's good to see those in action.
How'd you like the armored VF-31s with all the missiles and all that
Yeah,
stuff?
they look great actually. They almost looked like they had those on like each arm. They almost looked like reaction missiles, and I think they were meant to be
I think so
because they
too.
were the big
I
ones,
mean,
right?
they took
Like,
down a lot.
yeah, they
Yeah,
took out cruisers with them.
yeah.
Both Mirage and Hayate. They took out Windermerian ships with them. So I think they're meant to be reaction warheads, which is good because they look very much like them, and the size is consistent as well. Yeah, it was cool. Actually, one of the other things I did like about the mechanical animation in this episode, in most of the Macross series, whenever they're done with their armored mode, they want to get rid of it because it's damaged or something like that, or they're moving to the atmosphere, the armor just blasts off. They have like these explosive releases, and the armor just goes flying in all directions, and then the mecha
Yeah.
underneath, like, almost like it's breaking free from like an egg or a shell or something like that. It's like a butterfly, right? It's like it's gotten rid of its constraints and now it's free to fly. And that's what they've always done, like in both the CG animated series and in the traditionally hand animated series as well. In this episode, it was like the first time you've actually seen the parts almost rolled away. They lifted off and just sort of like fell away from the craft slowly as they were traveling through space, which I thought was so cool because it also reinforces like the weightlessness of the space that they're flying through, right? It was also a different visual that we haven't seen before. It was just sort of like a not explosive ejection of the armor, just a more gradual one, something that
Yeah.
one might even say a more realistic portrayal of how you would jettison sort of parts like that in a zero-G environment. It was very, very cool.
They went Elon Musk with the reusable armor. They were like, we could use this again,
Nice. I thought they looked pretty cool. I was happy to see them. We haven't seen them in a while.
I know.
I'm gonna get to that later.
God, yeah, we haven't seen them, and I think that's why this episode in particular was so enjoyable for me. Is maybe because I feel like I've been deprived of significant action with the VF-31s. And, I'm not, like super deep into mecha, but I like watching planes fight each other. It looks cool. And there wasn't a lot of that in the second half of the series. So we finally got it. And I think that's part of what made watching this last episode so fun, is it was long overdue to finally see sequences like this. And when they were done really, really well. Like the fight choreography looked really cool. The textures on everything looked nice. I recognized the armor packs right away. And I was like, sweet. We finally get to see them armored. There's another toy set having the armored VF-31.
Also, Hayate had the Shinigami. They didn't show it last episode, right?
No, that's new.
Yeah.
They added it just for this episode. I don't know if I want that.
What?
Sorry. I don't.
Why?
Unpopular opinion, because it's Messer's. That was really Messer's thing, was to be the Shinigami. And like, I know that Hayate said earlier in the series, like, yes, I'll pick up the slack where Messer used to be now that he's not part of our team. But that doesn't make him like, quote unquote, the new Shinigami.
I thought he was talking about Kaname. I'm just kidding.
Wait, what?
Okay, that's what Kaname said. What?
Yeah.
If anything, it should be Hayate Mikumo.
God.
Because they did have that. They have so
talked
many
one
scenes
time.
together, and they had that one tense scene, alone on the deck. Oh.
Wow, I can't believe you're actually 3. God.
Damn, girl, you said you're 3?
Oh man, but yeah, I like the mech action. I thought it was really good. We were missing though, and I'm sad it didn't come back, is where was our Immelman dance?
Yes.
They made such a big deal of that he can dance with the planes, and that was kind of his signature move, and then it went away.
Yeah, overall, I mean, I like the mechs, but the fights themselves, to me, were pretty lacking compared to other shows. I think they were rushed, just like a lot of the rest of the episode. There just wasn't enough kind of like one-to-one combat. I mean, I thought the point of introducing all these pilots on both sides was to have all these like great rivalries and maybe have some good deaths. We had a couple, but I feel like we could have killed off the twins. Nobody would have missed those guys. If there's 2 of them, you could have at least killed one of them. Yeah, there wasn't any great one-on-one combat. I mean, I'm just talking about this episode. We had our great rivalry between Keith and Messer. It was just like flashes of action in this episode to me. So I could have used some more. I think this Overall, yeah, I'm going back to saying that this episode was rushed too much.
The mini Tano circuses in a row didn't do it for you, huh?
No,
I think there was like what, 2 or 3 of them in a row.
I would say they blew their load too fast.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Oh gosh.
So in the scenes that we see at the end, Arid and Chuck are by the beach, and guess who shows up? And I was kind of looking for that because I could have sworn I made a joke in one of these shows, like, oh yeah, she's gonna show up at the end, wrapped in bandages and probably walking with a crush.
Oh my
or something.
god, Alex.
And I wasn't even proud of it. I was just like, no, that's silly. I can't believe they did that.
That's
And I was like, oh my god, she's alive, and the Mercats are
God,
alive.
that damn Mercat.
Yeah. And then we see Mirage Land with Mikumo. They're greeted by the rest of Walk Here, except Freya, who is in the VF-31J with Hayate. And I gotta say, that's probably one of my favorite scenes in this whole show. Probably.
Yeah, I like that.
I really like that scene.
I didn't get as much out of them as clearly you did, but they were fine. I don't really understand the pressing need for Marianne to come back, other than to just give us a little bit of a happy ending for some of the characters, kind of thing. For Chuck specifically. But it's pretty like there was nothing there for that, and the character itself is just like completely flat. So there's no there's no stakes or no big thing, at least for me. The final sequence between Hayate and Freya was kind of good. I like that. Like nothing unexpected or nothing particularly notable about it. Just like I guess just satisfaction that these two characters who I think were written to sort of get together at the end, and that's always good. But other than that, yeah, not much else.
Celia, why don't you kick this scene while it's down?
Oh my god. Okay, so before I go into the things that I did like, of all the things to resolve, it had to bring back the cat.
Like
of all things to make it to the end of the series, it's not even all the Mercats, it's the dumb brown one, the asshole cat. He had to survive. And then Mariana coming back, I'm pretty sure she was confirmed dead after that episode. Or maybe I misread something somewhere on the internet, but I thought she was confirmed dead. So when she came back, I'm like, what are you doing here? You had survived a wall of water, apparently.
You said something about somebody confirming it, but it was on the internet. It was never on the show.
Yeah. So, but of all the things to resolve, I didn't need those 2 things to be it. Like Marianne's been gone since she got blown away, literally blown away by a wall of water, and everyone stopped caring about her at that point. And the cat didn't appear again from the time that they left Ragna. So I'm like, why? I would have liked an emotional reunion with Chuck and the rest of his family if they were going to do that. Like, if we're going to bring Mariana back, let's have a scene where all the siblings are back together.
It's rushed. This episode is so rushed.
I know. But of the things
let's get into the good
stuff that I did like, though. So I liked when Mirage is standing in her plane and watching Hayate and Freya fly off, and there's a tear in her eye and a smile on her face. I loved that. I loved it so much. Even though she didn't win, I loved it. It visually looked great. I really liked Mikumo returning to Walkure. They're like, welcome back. They're like, okay, and she responds, Tadaima, and she says, I'm back. And I just really liked that too. That was a small warm fuzzy for me. I especially liked Hayate and Freya flying away though, because they were saying things to each other about the little things of their current life. Your rune goes pika pika and Mercats go splish splash, I think was what she said, or something like that. That harked back to that scene of them standing on the beach in the previous episode. Well, do you remember Love? The piano arrangement played in the background. And I swear I could hear it as I was listening to that. It wasn't in the episode itself, but it started playing in my head. Do you remember Love? So I did like that. And Hayate telling Freya, we will always be together without explicitly saying, I know you're going to die soon, but I will love you anyways. Like that was kind of neat. And then they flew off into the blazing sun in their plane, flying in a straight line the way Messer used to. The end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That pretty much says it. I really like that whole scene with Freya and Hayate. It was really, really sad. It was just the fact that she's not even going to last the 15 years that everybody else was counting on. It doesn't seem like she's going to last that long from the way that she's just like bawling, right? I mean, it's sad enough that her lifespan isn't that long to begin with, but the fact that it's shortened by the war and then they finally like find each other. I don't know. I just felt the whole tragic thing about it. I mean, I felt more of that than happiness for them.
Well, and even in that flashback too, I mean, I wish we got more. I keep saying that. I'm not going to say it anymore because I
I'll
think
say
it's
it.
clear.
Wish we got more. Yeah.
Even in that flashback where she's saying to Mirage, like, don't tell anybody because I don't want them to stop me from doing what I want to do. I want to spend the rest of my days singing with Valkyrie. And so I do like that they at least connected those two together. So yeah, the end.
The end.
That's it. All right. So because I know that this episode has been pretty polarizing online for people who either absolutely couldn't stand it or people who loved it. And I guess I'm kind of in the middle. I mean, Delta is not going to go down as my favorite Macross series of all time, but I don't think it'll be my least favorite because there were things about it that I liked.
Oh, no, it's not going to be my least favorite at all.
You know, there are definitely things about it that I liked. I'm just disappointed with the way it ended.
Uh-huh.
But overall, though, I still had fun watching it and fun participating with other fans while I was watching it. You know, because I did that for my first Macross show with Frontier, and now I get to do it again with Delta, and it's really neat to be able to do that at least. But yeah, I mean, Delta has its problems, but there are also good things about it. And I think
Yeah,
that's about it.
it's no way gonna be my least favorite. I still like it, especially I like the whole walk here thing
Me too.
also. So at least we walk away with that. I like the mech designs. I love the way they colored them. It was more like racing stripes instead of the old Valkyrie. I think there was like a transition between Macross, I would say Macross 0, but maybe Macross 7, and then it gets into more flashy stripes with Frontier. And I think with this one they really like went for it. Fortunately, it worked out for me, anyways.
Yeah, I thought they looked cool. I like the racing stripes and the color coding. It made it easier for me to tell who was who.
Yeah, yeah. I guess they've always had that though with Macross. I mean, that's the thing that kind of makes it more anime-like instead of trying to make it too realistic like a Macross 0. You guys want to get into messages?
Sure.
All right, let me read the first one. It's Dungeon RPG Delta. Discovered this way too late, but great podcast, guys. Fully enjoyed the whole hour. And yeah,
Thank you for
go back.
listening.
Go back and listen to all of them. Start over with the whole series. But yeah, thanks. Thanks for listening to us, even though it's almost, well, now that it's finished. So hopefully you're enjoying this one too. Here's from Sean. Sir Salisbury. I look forward to seeing Arid hang back during the final battle. Oh my god! That's something I forgot to say. I look forward to seeing Arid hang back during the final battle. Exo has something to rant about. Did you guys notice that he wasn't in the whole nakedness
He was
scene?
not. Captain Johnson was, but Arid was not.
I got this flash in my head where Arid's kind of like just eating jellyfish in his Valkyrie, and he's kind of like, "Where is everybody?" you know, flying around the Star Singer shrine.
Why is everyone flying the same direction? Oh gosh, yeah. Oh, Arid. So let's see. Felipe Cintron actually had a lot to say in his comment. But at the very end, he added on to it and said, just watched episode 26. Now I'm sad. Only one more Macross Delta recap episode. Not going to post spoilers. Thank you. Even though we spoiled everything. Haha. Also, one thing I just realized no one has addressed. Is this the first Macross season/series that doesn't have any kind of missile porn spam? I think maybe at the most there have been 5 mass missile uses in the entirety of this season. Was this a conscious change in design? There hasn't been a lot of, at least in the second half, there hasn't been a lot of mecha action anyways. So maybe that's why it seems like it's less.
There's a lack of Eternal Circus on this show.
Until this current episode where there was like 3 in a row.
There were some small ones during the whole series, but not some full-on, like the ones in Frontier where it was just, it filled the whole screen.
All right, so Guy Double X says, nice show. This was a fun discussion. I'm in agreement with Alex that Kaname is the best developed character in the show. That's best developed, not necessarily most developed. In fact, my perfect ending to the show would be Kaname punching Lady M, whoever she turns out to be, in the mouth for being such a manipulative jerk the whole time, quitting the group and announcing a follow-up series called Macross Divide, where she leads a team of kick-ass commandos that come back and clean up the mess left over from Delta. That's the show I want to see now. That sounds really neat.
Boy, that whole Lady M thing, it just, I mean, if they use her and Burger on a different show, on a new series, I'd be okay with it. Like, okay, this is a running thing, or if they decide, this is something that spans two shows, that's fine. But if that's it for those things, and the whole Mega Road thing, if that's it for that, that's disappointing.
Well, now that we've come to the end, the Mega Road piece from last episode feels so thrown in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, if they would have showed something at the end, like something like pop up on screen, like even as a cliffhanger, I would have been okay with it. But as something that they just squeezed in just to answer some question that we didn't really need answered, that was one question we didn't need answered because it was never there. I would have been okay with it.
Yeah, I don't know. At this point, I honestly don't care who Lady M is anymore. They've stretched it out so far that I'm like, okay, even if they had, like, I kind of wanted a reveal in episode 26, but I also knew that I would be underwhelmed by it because it was so late in the game to be like, here's Lady M, that I was like, okay, I don't care. But I still cared enough to kind of want to have that reveal anyways.
It's still a niche.
Yeah. But now that the series is over, like, I'm not going to lose sleep over who Lady M is now that the series is over, which goes to show just how impactful that was by dragging it out. I'm not so motivated to find out who she is that I'm like, give me more. Like, I'm ready for Delta to just kind of be done. And I don't know if I want an extension of the story because the conclusion was so crammed. I don't know if an extension is going to make it any better.
Ghost Bear 177. Woo! That's a wall of text. Why, yes, Ghost Bear 177. It is quite a wall of text. But it's my honor to read it and respond. So let's start at the beginning, shall we?
Yeah.
The whole Wright Immelman arc served no purpose. Yeah. Like, I guess largely it is sort of like it is kind of a dead weight narrative. There's not much there. I don't know if it serves like zero purpose. I mean, it does keep a mystery going throughout the series, and it also serves the purpose that Macross is kind of known for, which is like both sides misunderstanding the other. That's always been one of the themes that Macross explores whenever it comes to its warfare. And so the Wright Immelman case was sort of, even though it might not have been fulfilling in and of itself, its broader impact on the Macross Delta story is sort of there. If in theme, if not in any other sort of legitimately interesting dramatic arc. Bogue was practically suggesting not to use something unknown and dangerous. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I mean, I think I still side with Celia, and just the way that the Windermerian culture works. They're very like feudal, and just questioning the judgment of your king. It's pretty. Yeah, it's pretty. Unheard of and dangerous, especially for someone as young as Bogue. Who doesn't really have any standing or anything like that, and is kind of a hothead, to be honest, who needs to be reeled in by his fellow aerial knights on more than a few occasions. So he isn't isn't necessarily what you would call someone who's got some sway politically. He's kind of like out there in left field. No one really cares, and no one wants to hear from him, I don't think. So,
it was actually kind of weird for him to be the voice of reason too.
It was, yeah. That's kind of the other thing that was sort of strange about the whole thing. But I agree that, like, practically, like, Bogue was right. I'm just talking like in the context of the show, and that like his society and whatnot. Yeah, that just seemed like very out of character. Number one, it made him seem very thoughtful, which he has not shown up to this point. And then number two, it's just like he was like way out of line. So yeah. Arid sucks.
Was that one for me?
Alex.
Okay. Road one. Best case. Setting up future works with Lady M. Well, now that we've seen the next episode, I guess it's the utter disaster that could have been bringing in the original SDF Macross characters into Delta never happened, thank God. So this Lady M thing is just it's just a go nowhere thing. Yeah, not much really happened there. Mirage is the best, least utilized character ever. I don't know about ever, but she's probably the best, least utilized character in this series. What do you guys?
Chuck.
Ever.
Chuck.
Chuck.
Really?
Best least utilized character is Chuck.
Oh, I don't agree with that.
I like him. I wanted him to have more of everything. He needed more
Like
character.
him,
He
you know.
needed more development. He needed more story. He needed more screen time.
Oh.
Like he wasn't even present in the background.
No.
More Chuck.
He's fine. He's never meant to be a main character, so he shouldn't have any, like, what we get of him should be enough.
It wasn't.
He's like basically like the Kakazaki from the first series. The same sort of thing. He's just this lovable kind of, dork in a way. And he's this huge guy, and everybody sort of like likes him because he's a nice guy and he's, personable and he's funny and blah blah blah. But yeah, there's not much to his story. So yeah, I'm not feeling the need to go that way. So, but anyway, teach their own, I guess.
Maybe Claire Puddles. Claire Puddles is
yes, Claire Puddle.
more
from
Claire
the flashback.
Fucking hell. So yeah, I definitely would agree with it in the context of the series. Overall, like all of anime or all of entertainment, period. No, not even close. Although that's an impossible argument to make one way or the other anyway. But yes, a tragically underutilized character, especially because, and we talked about this like in our episode right here, all the things that were great about Mirage, and there was lots to like as a character. And there was plenty of opportunity for different sort of character paths and growth and everything else. And she is a tragically underutilized character in this show, I think, for sure. We got lots of her, but not the full range of development that at least I would have wanted. The Bridge Bunny delivering the package sums up my problems with the show. Yeah, actually, that's kind of a legitimate criticism.
You know what would have been cool is a mailman comes and then it was Lady M. That would have been awesome, right? Like,
Oh.
kill two birds with one stone.
That would have been so cool.
M stands for mailman.
Lady M is the fucking mailman. Oh my god. I would take that. That sounds like a great way to reveal Lady M.
That's fucking too brilliant to pass up. I love it. Okay, so back to the comment here. Let me finish it off here. Guys, Windermere is fucking brain raping the entire galaxy. That's an interesting take on it, but yeah, I agree. Like, the stakes are high in this war. I don't want you to get us wrong, though, Ghost Bear. I don't think that we were necessarily moralizing one way or the other. We were just sort of commenting on what a terrible tragedy it is. We weren't necessarily saying whether one side was more justified than the other. I think this Macross Delta as a series has done a good job showing just how despicable all the sides in this war were. I know the nuns get raked over the coals. They're like completely eviscerated as an organization. At almost every turn in every episode, they're shown to be complete bastards, which is weird because even though Macross Frontier was the first time it represented the new United Nations spacey and the new unified government as sort of somewhat incompetent or not, exactly in the right all the time, which was something new for Macross, it didn't really go all that far. At worst, it showed that the nun soldiers weren't as good as the SMS, just to, I guess, to prop up the SMS as, this amazing elite unit where all the best go, instead of the actual military itself, which is weird given that that is not the case in real life. I don't know, maybe you guys felt differently, but I think we were just talking about the tragedy of that fleet getting completely obliterated and all the life being lost and whatnot. We're not necessarily saying that they weren't justified in doing whatever they could. I mean, if it was up to me, I probably would have done the same thing as well. I mean, the stakes were just so ridiculously high. The Windermerians were planning to basically wipe out all sentience, in the galaxy and subsume it just like one unified mind where everybody loses their own individuality, which is absolutely horrifying to me. It's crime against humanity or crime against species doesn't even begin to cover it. You'd have to quantify it as something like, a crime against sentience itself. So it's just, yeah, it was horrifying, absolutely horrifying. The Star Song won't control the Windermereans; it will just kill them with icy crusties. Yeah, I guess that was one of the talking points we were sort of concerned with. It's like, what are the Windermereans going to suffer from this as well? And now that we've seen this episode, yeah, they were kind of taken in by it as well. They were subsumed by the Star Shrine, I guess it is, and Star Singer's song as well. So I guess that they were vulnerable as well. And then we see that, of course, somebody like Freya is vulnerable in ways similar to where Heinz was. Whenever they use their biofold waves with these sort of protoculture ruins, they take, considerable, it causes them considerable physical trauma, and can even lead them to having the Windermere skin condition advanced like well beyond what their years would suggest. So yeah, so that's it. So we got through your wall of text. Thank you, Ghost Bear 177. I hope that answers your concerns.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
This Sunday, we're going to be recording a wrap-up episode for the series as a whole. So if you'd like to participate, leave your comments below or hit us up on our social media pages on Facebook or Twitter, and we'll address your questions and comments in the episode.
That sounds cool. I'm going to be there for that.
I hope so.
You kind of have no choice.
All right, let's sign off. Celia Rose, where can we find you when you're not on the Macross Delta recap show?
You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Celia Rose Cosplay and on Twitter at Planets Twinkle. I think I might be doing a live stream for the first time on my Facebook page this weekend, unboxing my Minmay kit and just kind of chatting in general. So I'll be posting that on my Facebook page when that's going to happen.
And Chad, where are you at? Whoa, you could find me on the Macross Mecha Manual page, or you could find me on the Facebook page.
You got his intonation very well.
Well, after 26 episodes, you think? But then I forgot all the links. And this is EXO. You could find me on the Macross World Facebook page or the Macross Delta Facebook page. Or you could tweet at me at Macross Tweet, the official Macross World Twitter account. We'll see you next week for our wrap up. Thank you.